Okay, hi everyone. This is a new video. With this video, we are starting a new series dedicated to topics a bit different from the previous ones, topics that concern more artificial intelligence, neural networks, and also data processing, big data, etc., etc. Despite this, time permitting, I am also completing the preparation of other videos on quote-unquote mathematical topics, and so I hope during this summer period to be able to publish a good number of videos on all these topics. So why this new series of videos with different topics? I have actually talked about these things and already published them regarding the course. I covered these topics in the preparation course that I did for my colleagues, let's say during the summer of last year. But the way of covering these topics was obviously a bit particular, since they were in fact fellow computer science teachers. I didn't go into detail. I only did a very quick overview of the issues. Some who watched the videos told me that, in fact, I didn't go into detail. I didn't explain closely how the programs worked, what they were for, why they were important, etc., etc. So having some time available, now I'll try to fill this gap and show you some applications of neural networks, of classification systems, etc., etc. Things that have to do with you could say the first steps of artificial intelligence. Not in the sense that they are simple, not in the historical sense of the term, because for that there is, let's say, the basic lesson that I published already a few months ago. You can find it on the channel. So in this example, what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about a powerful machine learning classifier known as the support vector machine, or SVM for short. It is truly capable, and it possesses the unique potential to learn complex patterns, which is quite different from other standard classifiers that typically just draw simple planes within the high-dimensional configuration space to separate data points. What does this mean? That they are able to divide the examples we provide into 2, 3, 4, into a few classes that are well-defined, clearly linearly separable from each other, and well distinguished from one another. I saw a book that is cited here. It's called Machine Learning with Python, from the publisher Apogeo, which deals a bit generally with these classification systems. And among these, there was one, SVM, which seems capable of being more powerful from this point of view, that is, being able to learn even from rather complex examples. So I thought about modifying an application that was in the book. In the book, there was the application related to the iris. The iris is a flower in this case. And the variety of iris was recognized based on the dimensions of the leaves, or other numerical values that were reported. So a numerical database, and based on this, the classification of the iris was performed. The parameters in this case were 3. The distribution of the data was a bit complicated, meaning there were overlaps. So we already expect, even in that, let's say, very basic example, that the classification won't be 100% perfect, because if there are uncertain situations, just as a human expert can make a mistake, the neural network in that case can also make a mistake. And based on this example, I thought about doing a more complex one, that is, teaching the neural network to recognize the outline of the Italian regions. So what we will do in this video is very, let's say, conceptually quite simple. We begin by introducing the neural network architecture, and then we proceed to perform a comprehensive training of this model. This training process is based on geographical location, where we provide the precise coordinates for every single Italian municipality. Furthermore, for each municipality, during this training phase, we also explicitly define which region it belongs to, ensuring the model learns the correct spatial relationships. After that, in the test phase, with other data that was not used for training, we try to guess, or rather to have the network guess, which region those municipalities belong to for which we did not provide, let's say, the region membership. And this is the first step. Since our learning is based on geographic coordinates, if at this point we build a grid system where we place a set of points no longer with a specific connection to the municipalities, and therefore we build a geographic grid with X and Y coordinates that correspond to latitudes and longitudes, we can reconstruct the map of the Italian regions, at least the outline, and see if these regions correspond to the real ones. Now, where is the interesting part? If a network manages to learn to build these regions, which for the network are decision regions, they are not geographic regions. That is, they are regions in which one must distinguish one class from another. If we manage to do this, it means that this type of model will be able to learn data of practically any complexity, provided that they are obviously not contradictory. So we no longer have the need for the data, for example, to be linearly independent. So I can tell you, maybe this isn't something that appears immediately to those who are not experts in the field, but I can tell you that this is a fairly interesting step forward. Before going into detail, I'll tell you that this example, besides being based on Rashka's book, also contains some, let's say, some improvements that are due to the Anaconda environment. Because you see, for those who know, let's say, this environment, I am in a channel called Jupyter Notebook, which is part of the, let's say, Anaconda environment. So we use some specific things. This is, let's say, a technical note, but I think it's important to acknowledge it. So let's see how this code works, which isn't very long, by the way. And it works with a function, excuse the pun, that takes care of preparing the calculation and takes care of defining, obviously, some parameters. X and Y are the input and output parameters. I don't know if you noticed, the X is uppercase while the Y is lowercase. Why is that? Because X is the set of input parameters while Y is the set of output parameters. Now, the input parameters for each example are a set of numbers, while the Y for each example is just a single number, the one that expresses the class it belongs to. For us, the class will be the region. It will be the individual region. What is a classifier? You can use different types of classifiers. Python libraries now make available many different classifiers. And so it becomes very easy to try different classifiers. That's what I did a bit, even if I won't talk about it in this video for reasons of time. Xtest, as you can see, was, let's say, not used in this case. So let's move on. So NumPy, another important library that provides us with very complex numerical objects that we can use easily. And then the definition of the markers. Markers are graphic signs that we use to mark, in this case, in this program, they were used to mark the municipalities, but I only use them during the development phase. Now then, in the presentation phase of the results, I didn't use them anymore. Instead, I used colors. Do you see? I used colors, and if you see, there are 22 colors, not 20. There are 20 Italian regions. It's because there were some issues regarding the background. The background needed to be colored with a different color from the others. So we are already at 21. And I had some classification issues with one region that I had to work around by adding a 20-second different color. All right. Some variables that we need for, I won't go into the absolute smallest detail later, but you can copy the code. By the way, I will make the code available on GitHub in a few days as soon as I finish making the final adjustments in a GitHub channel, let's call it that, which is called Iaconomano. So you can go and take a look. There will be a public repository available from which you can copy, let's say, you can take the code. However, I advise you, I'm keeping the screen still, I advise you to transcribe the code as I show it to you, because the time you spend copying it is certainly a useful thing to understand what is being done, obviously. So what do we do at the beginning? We need to draw an image, the image of Italy. So one of the things we need to do is prepare the image. So when you see some values that have to do with plot, we are simply calling an object from the matplotlib library that we will need to print. Here, what are we doing? We start by preparing the grid. There, it may seem strange. We are starting a bit from the end. We start by preparing the grid. And with these operations, we divide the space into many equidistant points. How many points are there? Well, in this example, I used 400 points, but 400 points already mean that we have to deal with a very high number of points, and the processing would take a long time. Obviously, I'll show you the results already ready, and I won't show you the processing in progress because it takes about 10 minutes on its own. It can be done with a saw, perhaps by decreasing the number of points to get a practically immediate result. Once the grid is prepared, thanks also to these functions that are part of NumPy, here is the power of libraries, knowing the libraries, knowing the specific functions. A lot of work is done quickly, and we have the possibility to call our classifier, our neural network, and run it on the grids. But we still haven't, one might say, we still haven't trained the neural network. Well, this is the function that we will call during the execution of the program. The program, before calling this function, will obviously do the training of the network. At this point, when this part here is running, we will have already trained the network, and with this instruction, we could directly execute the classification based on the neural network on all the points of the grid, to solve the border problem. What was happening now? If I perform the classification on 20 regions, it happened that the border was classified as one of the 20 regions, typically as Piedmont, which is the first region that has code 1. To be able to distinguish the first region from the background, I had to do some work represented by this code, which also, from a computational point of view, is not trivial, because for every point it goes to check if there is a nearby municipality. If there is a nearby municipality, then it means we are talking about a point in the Piedmont region. If there is no nearby municipality, it means we are talking about a point in the background. So I had to do this, let's say, heuristic part. After that, we move on to the decision regions. That is, it prints the decision regions. It uses a function, this contour, which is used normally for functions, let's say, of two variables printed in 3 dimensions. That is where it prints the x and the y and the z as a function of this variable. So you will notice in the image that there are some small contours because it's as if in that area the function had a higher value, like a mountain. Think of it a bit like how, let's say, the ISO, the contour lines, I think they are called, inside mountains are represented. All right, let's move on to the program specifically. So first of all, the time, because in some cases it takes a long time, and it's important to see how much time we spent in order to be able to work with the parameters. The libraries we need, the data we need, this wouldn't be possible to do. It wouldn't have been possible to do this work if we didn't have the data of all the Italian municipalities stored in a database. It's clear that this work, therefore, in some way, can also be, let's say, it can also be classified. It can also be viewed as big data, as processing on large-scale data. There are about 8,000 Italian municipalities, and so the moment we start processing the data, depending on the type of processing we do, we can have, let's say, a more or less heavy workload. For example, if we had to calculate, as I have done in other examples, in other situations, the distance between any pair of municipalities, we would already have 8,000 by 8,000 64 million calculations to perform, which starts to be a somewhat demanding number, at least for normal computers, for the laptops we normally use. So here are, in this file, all the data is contained. How can you get this file? I will publish it. I'll publish this on GitHub too. I'll make it available because these are absolutely public data anyway. So we have the data import, we have the preparation of this data, and then comes, as you can see here, the model is prepared. The library we are using is scikit-learn, which is abbreviated as sclearn. And from this, we loaded the train test split module, the one that separates for us, that works on the input data and separates the data between those we need to use for training and those we need to use for testing. Other operations are performed, for example, scaling. A numerical operation is carried out so that the data is not, let's say, expressed in arbitrary units, but is between -1 and 1, therefore between the maximum value and the minimum value. If there is any data that is particularly wrong, let's say outliers with very high values, you might eventually have to decide to remove them. So all the analysis part that must always be done before training a network. And then you, yes, let's say, prepare the data specifically for training. You prepare the data for testing, okay? You put, let's say, 1 on top. This operation does the stack. So it puts the training data on top of the test data because then it will use them. In the next phase, it has to use both of them for the visualization. But I didn't use this. At a certain point, we import this SVC. SVC is actually the classifier, support vector classifier, in this case, SVC. And we build it, you see, with a single instruction, we build the neural network that has to do this for us. There are some parameters, the gamma parameter and the C parameter. These parameters essentially oversee the generalization, how much one should learn from a single example. If we had time, I would show you the effect of these parameters and how quickly one should learn. So the C parameter essentially tells us that at each individual test step, we must advance more or less, depending on the specific constraints we have set for the process. Well, you know that if I do it too quickly, I learn too quickly, I run the risk of not reaching convergence. If I learn too slowly, I waste time, right? This is somewhat the meaning of this C parameter. The gamma parameter, on the other hand, concerns every single piece of data. In this case, with this metric, every single piece of data becomes an attractor. How strong must this attractor be? How large an area around it should the single example make itself felt? This is important in our case where we need to draw a map, because we shouldn't have this parameter be either too small or too large. Because if we make it too large, the map becomes confused. It takes on, let's say, values that are too rounded. And if we make it too small, we have holes in the map. So we have to run some tests here as well. Very often, the ease with which we can launch these types of processes is now being used to rerun tests automatically with standard programs, trying out these parameters, different values for these parameters, and seeing each time what the best result is, let's say in a rather heuristic way. All right. With that said, we can now move on to perform the testing, followed by the training, and then the model fitting in this specific case. Once that is done, we will proceed to call that function. There you see that specific function we prepared earlier was actually quite useful in the end. It was absolutely essential to execute the final critical part of the operation. And at this point, we have also successfully established exactly which municipalities we need to perform the test on. This ensures that our data collection remains precise and that we are targeting the correct areas for our analysis. There, at the beginning, they were set to null, but now instead, we are saying that in the data set, remember that we stack the data, we put the training data first, and then the data of first the training data and then the test data. There, we are taking from the final part of this vector the data to then perform the test within that program. the data on which that program must then base itself to establish the grid that function. All right. Then there are these commented outlines. These commented outlines are tests done with different classifiers. Since it's so simple, just changing a few lines, it can be done. Especially, for example, this one with the random forest, I expected more, but I saw that the SVM, the type of classifier, gives us the best results. So let's take a closer look at what happens during the execution. When I initiate the run, the system begins by preparing the initial grid structure. It then sets up the environment for working with the model. Next, it builds the SVM model, constructs the classifier, and finally, it rebuilds the grid once more to ensure everything is ready. This was actually the work on the initial data. It prepares the initial data, I should have said, there we go. It prepares the model, it builds the grid. These steps obviously take a bit of time if you were to run them essentially. And then on the grid points, it runs the neural network in the testing phase to see which region they belong to. And then we have an example based on 400 grid points by about 400 grid points, which corresponds to 164,400 total points. And this takes a little while, obviously, to calculate the result. And in the end, we have this result. So in this result, we see the Italian regions. What is special about it? I didn't tell the system, I didn't tell the neural network, the SVM, what the outline of the regions was. I showed some points and I said for the various points, this belongs to Lombardy, this belongs to Piedmont, and so on and so forth. Starting from those points, the network generalized. This map is not based on the data that I gave to the network for the test, for the training, nor for the test. It is based on a generic grid of coordinates. And for those points on the generic grid, the classification is used. The classification value that was, let's say, learned, excuse my slightly shaky Italian, that was deduced, there we go, from the previous work of the network is printed. And the fact that the Italian regions more or less have the outline that they have in reality means that the network was able to classify the points of the territory based on this concept. Is it important? Is it interesting? Yes, for two reasons. First, because it is a relatively intelligent task. Now, I will explain what I mean by this point here. And then because, precisely, the network is able to learn, as I told you, with regions of any shape at this point, no longer just separation hyperplanes. Why? Let's close on this. Why is it an intelligent task? I propose let's say a thought experiment. Let's remove these shapes of the regions and let's just leave the outline of Italy, okay? Let's exclude the island regions because otherwise it becomes too simple. So let's exclude Sicily and Sardinia because otherwise it becomes too simple. Let's place a dot in any spot. Let's place a dot somewhere. Let's mark a point and ask, for example, a student if this point belongs to the Lombardy region, the Veneto region, the Emilia-Romagna region, etc., etc. Let's redo this. Let's redo this test for many points. Now, what do we expect? We expect that a student would be able to, like any person for that matter, would be able to guess 80 to 90% of the points. But then if they were to land on a border, I repeat, in a situation where we only have the external outline of Italy as a reference, not the outlines of the individual regions, in a situation of this kind, I expect a result of around 80 to 90%. If we have the network do this, I haven't done the precise work, but we are certainly around 95% of positive result. That is positive recognition of the positive classification of the geographical points as belonging to the region. And when you get a result, an automatic classification system gets a result that is comparable to that of people, of human experts, as they usually say, well, this automatically classifies itself as an intelligent function. So within the scope of this problem, this network is doing something quote unquote intelligent. So this result is certainly a result on which, at least at an academic level, it is worth, let's say, spending some time. It is worth working on, because there are many insights that can then also be used in other problems, in other situations, and so it is definitely worth working on. I hope that the topic was of interest to you, and I'll leave you for the next video.